Now, this is actually going to be a follow-up video to the one I did last weekend, where I asked all of you if we should be worried about the apparent escalation in force powers, and if soon Star Wars is going to feel more like a superhero franchise and less like, well, Star Wars, which, though it has elements of many different genres in it, is one that, at least I think, is put in a category of its own, because there really never has been before, or likely will be again, anything quite like Star Wars. Which is why I very much agree with our top-rated comment from that video, which came to us from Kevin Sanchez, who said, Star Wars might need to change its pacing and editing to keep pace with modern movies, but if Palpatine, Vader, and Yoda appear as weaklings compared to Snoke, Rey, and Kylo, then that would be a huge mistake. Power levels don't need to change to tell a compelling story. Power levels also don't make us care more about characters. It's actually personality and vulnerability that makes us care about characters. And his sentiment about characters being what makes Star Wars what it is was echoed by many others, and again, one I very much agree with. Because even though when I was very young I was probably mainly drawn to lightsaber fights and amazing space battles, the reason I'm still here now, several decades later, talking about Star Wars, and why I watch and still love these movies today, is the characters. Because as I got older and started to understand the movies better, it wasn't the lightsaber battles that kept me coming back for more, though I certainly do enjoy them. It was the connection to the characters I felt, and for me at least, my favorite character was Luke. And as I've said before in other videos, as silly as it may sound now as an adult, when I was young, I wanted to grow up to be just like Luke Skywalker. I wanted to think that I would have the courage to risk facing Darth Vader to save my friends, or that I would calmly turn myself in and again face Vader and his Emperor for just the chance to possibly save my father, even though deep down I knew I never could defeat one of them, much less both of them, if my father didn't turn back. And I didn't want to be like Luke because he was this insanely powerful Jedi, because when you think back to the original trilogy, Luke is never shown doing anything truly powerful and amazing with the Force. Sure, he blows up the first Death Star, but all he was really doing there was, in a sense, bullseyeing a womp rat, as he himself said he'd done plenty of times before. And I'm not saying it wasn't impressive, and that he didn't quite literally save the galaxy. I'm just saying the act itself, hitting a small target, was not the craziest, most powerful use of the Force ever. It was the result that was the impressive part. Anyway, I wanted to be like Luke because his hero's journey was evident to someone who, once upon a time when he was young, didn't even know that was a thing. His incredible story that saw him go from a whiny farm boy who only thought of himself to a Jedi Knight who bravely faced the greatest evil the galaxy may have ever seen, spoke to me then, and still speaks to me today, even after seeing those movies somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 times each, and no, that's not really an exaggeration. And the amazing thing about the end of Luke's story, at least in the original trilogy, is he won because he chose not to fight. And think about how crazy that is, considering in this day and age, how many movies end with giant battles that see entire cities leveled. And sure, the Battle of Endor was going on at the same time, both in space and on the ground, and that did provide plenty of action. But I think it's safe to say, if Return of the Jedi was made nowadays, by someone other than George Lucas, Luke would likely fight and somehow kill the Emperor, even though in all reality, he shouldn't have had a chance in hell in defeating him at that point. And all of this leads me back to my personal biggest fear for this new trilogy, that Rey will be able to defeat Snoke and or everything and anything else in her path because of some powerful link to the Force that she has, even though, just like Luke, she's starting her training very late in her life and shouldn't have the ability to go against such heavy hitters, if you will. Just like Luke was easily outmatched by both Vader and Palpatine, and you could say Luke held his own against Vader in the second duel and ultimately defeated him, but at the beginning of that battle, Luke was clearly just on the defensive, while Vader was already beginning to make his turn back to the light, hence Luke felt conflict in him. Then at the end, Luke was only able to defeat Vader by going full dark side on him before eventually pulling himself back. And I'm not saying I don't think or want to see Rey become a great and powerful Jedi. I just want there to be at least some natural progression. I want to see her fail and fall a bit before she ultimately finds a way to succeed. And I don't want her to succeed just because she's become more powerful than everybody else, but because she has learned and grown as a character. To put it gently, The Empire Strikes Back was a smack in the face for Luke, and if The Last Jedi isn't the same thing for Rey, then I have a bad feeling about this. And now, with all that being said, let me pull back a bit from the dark side and say that I obviously have no idea how this trilogy is going to play out, and I'm making a lot of assumptions here that could be dead wrong. However, the more powerful you make the Force, and they are certainly hinting things are about to get a lot more powerful, And the more the Force gets explained and explored, the more it loses that mysticism that makes it so fascinating. Though this is kind of like a double-edged sword here, because to never expand on the Force or explain aspects of it is going to frustrate a lot of us fans. Because even though we love the mystery and it makes Star Wars great, like all mysteries, we do want some answers. So in my opinion, Lucasfilm now has the very difficult and maybe even impossible task of both expanding some aspects of the Force and also keeping it very mysterious. And that's not going to be easy to do with as much Star Wars that gets thrown at us nowadays, and will for years to come. Because explaining it too much could have dire consequences. Just look at how angry people got over midi-chlorians because they thought these little bugs were the Force, when in reality that was never the case. They just allowed for beings within the living Force to hear the will of the cosmic Force. Though I think the biggest problem people had with them, and certainly what I didn't like about them, is that they are an implied power meter. Because the very last thing Star Wars should ever do is begin to quantify the Force. Now, certainly not everyone who commented agreed with me that Force power shouldn't be expanded on too greatly, and there were plenty of people all foreseeing new and much greater uses of the Force. And a lot of them made excellent points, just like Desmond did here with his comment, which I encourage you to pause and read if you'd like. And I certainly am, as most people who responded were, okay with some new and even greater powers. However, and again going back to our top comment for a moment, you can't suddenly make the great characters that came before look like weaklings next to these new characters. Not only are you going to anger a great deal of the fan base, it's also going to feel very jarring. So if it is their plan to suddenly amp everything up to 11, and the name of episode 7, The Force Awakens, does seem to warn us this is a possibility, I hope they give us a really good explanation for this increase in power, and also that it doesn't stop feeling like the Star Wars we've known for 40 years now. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think, and to also ask if you have any questions you'd like to see us all tackle in future discussion videos. And they can be about absolutely anything relating to Star Wars, of course. So until next time, thanks for watching.